Turkey's long-awaited bid to buy F-16 fighter jets from the US could get a fresh look. Senator Ben Cardin has been named as the new chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, which oversees US arms sales. A day after taking over the role, Senator Cardin announced he's willing to look into the stalled deal. Turkey requested 40 new fighter jets and 80 modernisation kits back in 2021. The previous committee chairman, Senator Bob Menendez, who recently stepped down over bribery charges, was staunchly against the deal. Senator Menendez and his wife were charged last month with accepting hundreds of thousands of dollars in bribes to aid the Egyptian government. Investigators found hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash, gold bars and a luxury car in a raid at the senator's home. It's the second bribery scandal to hit the longtime senator, who survived a previous 2015 indictment on similar charges. Menendez has been the most vocal opponent of Turkey in the Senate, having blocked the F-16 deal for 2 years. Let's break down what this new appointment means with our expert panel. Joining me from Istanbul is Helene Sara Ertem. She's an associate professor at Medeniyet University. And from Washington, D.C. is Rich Utzon. He is a former US diplomat. Thank you both for joining us here on Straight Talk. Rich, I want to start with you. How do you see Menendez's departure playing out here?
It's good to be with you. Thanks for having me, and good to see you again, Helene, as well. So I see this as more of a stylistic than a substantive change. It would be hard to have a worse banner carrier for the bilateral relationship on the U.S. end than Robert Menendez, given his longstanding and somewhat theatrical opposition to closer ties and his consistent use of his position atop the SFRC, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, to hold up steps that would enhance bilateral cooperation. That said, he is sort of a symptom and a symbol rather than the whole problem. His departure, while it means that one of the most enthusiastic opponents of bilateral convergence is out of the picture, or at least off of the committee, does not mean that the structural problems go. And the structural problems remain rooted in the idea that the Senate, the United States Senate, for its part, sees arms deals and defense industrial cooperation as a way to gain concessions from allies. In this case, problematic ally for different reasons. There's several different policy and matters that the United States and Turkey differ on. And those haven't gone away. There's still the matter of Swedish accession. There is still the matter of human rights concerns in Washington that for Cardin's, who's stepping in for Senator Cardin, really are quite a big deal. Now, on the Turkish side, I think it's going to be a little bit easier to try to conduct some discreet diplomacy to solve those things. So it's a net gain for the bilateral relationship that Menendez has gone, but it's not a magic or silver bullet that solves the big problems.
You mentioned Sweden and NATO, and obviously we are going to get to that because there's no way we can talk F-16s and not discuss that topic. But Helene, let me ask you to respond to what Rich has been saying. I mean, Senator Menendez, a Democrat, wasn't the only critic of Turkey in the US Senate. Several prominent Republicans also have an issue with the relationship, especially on defense terms. Do you see Menendez leaving as changing that or getting Turkey back on the front foot at all?
Well, as someone following Turkish-American relations for a long time, actually, I don't remember any single era in which we didn't have any crisis. For that reason, there will always be crisis. Even though we have a new appointment now, there will be problems, crisis, but the most important point is whether we are going to solve this crisis, have the ability to solve this crisis, or the intention to solve this crisis, and continue the partnership between the two countries. For that reason, I do believe that, there are problems to solve, and especially the military aspect of the problems are quite prominent. But at the same time, with this new appointment, I think this is a kind of change of blood, a kind of refreshment between the two countries. For that reason, at least the hope on the Turkish side will increase that we can build better relations in the coming future. And I also believe that the American side also understands, especially with the continuing Ukrainian war, that they too need Turkey, and there should be a kind of reconciliation between the two sides, even though there are some problems. Plus, I do also believe that regarding the global aspect of the issue, the Chinese and the so-called, let's say, quote unquote, the Chinese and Russian threats, let's say, as they are existing, of course, Turkey will somehow feel the pressure much more over itself, coming from the Western side, coming from the Western allies, that Turkey should be quite careful, and Turkey should sometimes maybe find itself in a position to make a choice between the West and the East. For that reason, I do believe that the American pressure over Turkey will continue to a certain extent, but there is still a kind of chance to build better relations.
For whatever reason, ratification of Sweden's NATO bid has found itself linked with this F-16 deal. Rich, do you feel like we could get to a bit of a situation where we could have a bit of a standoff? How do we avoid a standoff where the US Congress is holding the sale off until Turkey ratifies the bill, and Turkey holding off ratifying the bid for Sweden until it gets its F-16s?
Well, I think, unfortunately, that's exactly where we're at. I know that the best efforts of the two ambassadors involved, so Jeff Flake, the U.S. ambassador in Ankara, for instance, has gone to Washington, D.C. on multiple occasions with senior Turkish officials to talk to people on Capitol Hill to try to convince them that this is a transaction that needs to be conducted on a basis of trust. So both sides should move simultaneously, and the Senate and Congress should not wait for proof of good intentions from the Turks before moving forward with their part. There should be some reciprocity and some simultaneity. And for his part, Ambassador Mercan, Murat Mercan, the Turkish ambassador in Washington, has been tireless in his efforts as well. But look, this is a low trust environment. And in a low trust environment, even a transactional relationship is difficult. So I think right now, the Biden administration has gone on record as saying, look, these two things are not linked. But they kind of are, and in the eyes of the Senate, they certainly are. Now, what we've seen out of Ankara in the most recent month or so is a little frustration, frankly, with this, and a reminder that the Turkiye Büyük Milli Meclis also has a role in such things. And I'm reminded of the fact that when the U.S. conducted its invasion of Iraq in 2003 and wanted to send forces through Turkey to do so, it was not the AKP government at the time that said no. It was the parliament itself that did not pass the tezkere. So actually, in the Turkish system, parliament matters too. And I think we're in a situation now where the parliamentarians on the Turkish side, especially those not in President Erdogan's party, the Milli Hareket Partisi and others, are saying, look, we matter too. And for us, if Congress is going to hold it up for their own reasons, look, we've got reasons too. And the fact that Sweden has not fulfilled its obligations under the trilateral memorandum is something we cannot ignore. So I think we're there. I think we're unfortunately at a situation where each side says, you take the first step, and then we can have an effective transaction, but neither side trusts the other to carry out that step.
Helene, what do you think? Are they waiting on each other to take the first step? And do you think Turkey could be the country to say, well, we'll be the bigger party here, we're going to take the first step and see what the US does?
Well, it depends. I'm not sure, because both of the countries' leaders, governments, they are responsible for their audience, the followers, let's say, the voters. For that reason, they have to say something logical to their voters in order to persuade them why they changed their decision regarding a certain issue. For that reason, I think Turkey's position is not that easy at all, because the terror issue is quite a sensitive issue among the Turkish public. And the operations in northern Iraq is going on. There are terror attacks still continuing in Turkey. So the population, Turkish nation, is feeling this deeply. And this is a big sensitive issue among the Turkish population. For that reason, I think Turkey will also, and quite probably will also, wait for the United States to take a concrete step first, rather than making Turkey take this step before the United States. I guess both sides are trying to understand each other, but since the very beginning, these relations are about bargaining. Unfortunately, you have to take something and give something. For that reason, I think, they will both wait for each other to see something sincere.
And Rich, if they continue to wait and it goes nowhere and Turkey decides, well, it's going to source its jets from elsewhere and it pulls out of the F-16 deal, what kind of implication could that have for Turkey's defence relationship with the United States?
Well, we have to remember it's somewhat ironic that the F-16 upgrade and purchase deal was not originally a Turkish idea. This was an idea that came out of the U.S. Defense sector because of the expulsion of Turkey from the F-35 program and the idea that as a NATO ally, our military thinkers thought that we needed to make sure that there was not a gap between the current generation of F-16s aging out and Turkey bringing on its own Milli Muharip Uçak in 5, 10, 15, 20 years. So this stopgap was originally an American idea. So it's a little ironic then that the U.S. is the one then at the political level to say, well, no, really, we didn't mean it. This can't go forward. I think Turkey has been for at least 25 years, maybe 30, on a strong drive to localize and nationalize its defense industries, and by that I don't mean to take it out of private hands, but I mean to make sure that it is not dependent on foreign suppliers. This trajectory continues, and frankly, the F-16 deal was going to be an exception to that, not the rule. So if the F-16 deal doesn't go, I think it's not going to change the fundamental dynamic of a defense industrial divorce of sorts. The fact that we are going in different ways because the U.S. likes to sell proprietary information and not do co-production and technology sharing. Turkey likes all those things. That's not going to change. But the big question then is, what will Turkey do? Will it go through a supplier like working in conjunction with the United Kingdom, which would be fine? That would not actually be a net loss for bilateral relations with the U.S. because the UK is a NATO ally. If, however, it ends up going with, say, a Russian platform or a Chinese platform, then we have a whole new crisis and a whole new problem. So let's hope there's a intra-NATO solution to this.
That would open an entire new can of worms, which I am sure we would be discussing if we ever found ourselves in that eventuality. Helene, we are almost out of time. Let me just very briefly put the final question to you. If Turkey does ratify Sweden's NATO bid, would you anticipate that very quickly, soon after the F-16 deal would be done? Would this be a very quick process after that?
Yeah, I think so. Otherwise, the gap of trust between the two allies would be bigger and bigger. For that reason, they both need to see some kind of good intention from each other. I don't think that Turkey will force its limits to break itself apart away from the Western alliance, but it has to see something concrete from the American side. For that reason, I think if there will be a kind of stepping forward, then the other one will follow this step.
Helene, Sarah Ertem and Rich Utzen, we really appreciate your expertise here on Straight Talk. Thank you for your time.